rate of growth around software as a service. Now, what you see here on the right-hand side is market size. Now, I've plotted this out through 2020, and you can see that green bar just jumping up every year. In fact, it's shifting at a rate of about 3% every year, is shifting towards new cloud-based software. So draw the line out 5 more years, 2025, 2030. What is that market going to look like? We're going to see a flip where most of that spending is on cloud-based software. The second market I want to highlight for you here is the infrastructure market. And what we did again is compare various aspects of the infrastructure market. I mentioned servers and storage and virtualization and so on. It represents actually a pretty big total addressable market for systems infrastructure. Again, if you look at the growth rates, 2.8% for non-cloud, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, about 32% for cloud. What's interesting is that 2.8% is actually kind of artificially buoyed up. We see people buying infrastructure, traditional infrastructure, servers and storage and so on, rather than buying cloud. And you might think, well, why is that? That spend is mostly service providers who are delivering cloud services, okay? So if you take that away, those markets are actually in decline as the servers are shifting from private data centers toward cloud data centers. So if you're in that business of supplying hardware for data center systems, you need to have a cloud strategy for how you capture some of that spend related to the infrastructure. What that means is in this market, about 2% of the total market shifts every year to cloud. So you can see, again, that juggernaut is just going to continue to chew away at those traditional markets. Now, I've showed you 2 examples, but if we look at the whole market in aggregate, what I'm showing here are all the different types of cloud services compared to non-cloud. And that green line, the green bars at the bottom, represent that cloud spending. The blue lines represent traditional spending. The cloud shift percentage, that is the penetration into the markets over that course of 2014 through 2020, you can see this year about 16% of the total market in terms of spending, rising to 24%. Right? So cloud shift, as I mentioned, cloud's a really interesting topic, but it's not an academic topic anymore. These are material changes that are happening. These markets are big enough now that it's swinging the landscape. It's impacting vendors positively and negatively. It's certainly impacting the behavior of your clients. Broken out, what this looks like is about 41 billion in business process services, 13 billion in platform, 39 billion in software as a service, and infrastructure as a service, $25 billion. Incidentally, this number, infrastructure as a service, that I mentioned, the fastest growing part of that market, will grow to just shy of about $70 billion by 2020. And as I said, this year in aggregate, that looks like about $118 billion in spend. In addition to these direct shifts that I mentioned, like I said, there are a lot of indirect shifts that will happen as well. And particularly in IT services, we're seeing a pretty dramatic impact. Consulting, implementation services, managed services, in addition to some of the related services around networking and telecom services. So you may be asking yourself, what should we do in this era of cloud shift? That's a really good question. I've got a couple of things that I present for your consideration. First of all, watch for the disruptions that are happening in existing technology markets. And the disruption is often manifest by the emergence of new vendors or substitute vendors in those markets. And they provide a clue for you as to when some of these trigger events are going to happen and what the alternatives are that your customers will consider. So the first thing is about watching the market. The second one is about watching your customers. And I mentioned this earlier, but these IT spending events related to cloud will be tied, by and large, to one of those trigger events. So what that means is you have to have sales and account management teams that are very intimately involved with your customers. They have to be in those conversations every day. They have to be aware of and hopefully influencing strategy in your customers' environments to help be aware of when those decisions are being made so that you can be there to help them with those decisions. Like I said, sometimes those will result in cloud shift and sometimes they won't. Either way, it takes a much more intimate engagement than we've seen in the past. The third point, I've talked a lot about cloud spending here, but as you've seen in the numbers, there's also a big market of traditional systems that remain out there. Don't neglect those. In your exuberance to capture cloud shift, which you absolutely should do, definitely take advantage of those high growth rates. Don't neglect those existing systems. Most organizations will end up in a hybrid mode with some traditional systems, some cloud systems. And for many of you, those traditional systems represent a very important and reliable source of revenue. So don't forget that. The next point is, and this might seem pretty straightforward, but build offerings that are built to capture cloud shift. Sometimes that's going to be, a new offering or a rebranding of your existing offerings, like a consulting or managed services offering. But in many cases, it'll be manifest through the relationship you have with luminaries in the cloud markets today. Find opportunities to connect to those who are doing well in the cloud market and represent cloud growth in the minds of your customers. Lastly, exploit these industry trends, right? So certainly growth in public cloud. There's going to be interesting activity around different types of clouds like private cloud and hybrid cloud. And watch for these little micro trends. It's a little bit like playing the stock market. There'll be, swings up and swings down. Watch those markets and take advantage of those opportunities based on what your customers are trying to do. And hybrid in particular, as I mentioned, is going to be a scenario that continues to persist into the future. So, oops, hit the wrong button. So the last point that I wanted to say is that, we work with a lot of clients through this process. It can be really complicated as a provider today to think about, well, how do I invest? Most of my money comes from traditional systems. I know that there are growth opportunities in cloud. How do I balance those two? And that's a hard question to answer, to be honest. In every case, through your careful consideration and study of market trends, which we will help you with, you can figure out that right balance. And a balance, by the way, that is going to shift over time. There will be moments when you're going to want to go deeper and stronger into cloud, other times when you're going to want to hold back and focus on the value of your existing technology base in conjunction with cloud. We highlight a lot of these different things and attributes in our research, things like trends and size, what's happening in the competition, as well as good guidance on go-to-market programs. The key point here is, as I mentioned, cloud shift is going to impact every market, and it's important to manage the opportunities and the risks. And like I said, I invite you to take advantage of some of the great research we have. Next up, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Hank Barnes, who's going to take us through go-to-market strategies. Thanks.
Great, thanks everyone. Hope you're enjoying so far. One thing I just wanted to reflect, because I'm big in setting context, is that if you're attending a lot of the other sessions other than this at the event, you're hearing most of the research that Gartner does for your customers, for buyers. And all three of the analysts here, our primary efforts are research for you, so you're going to get that context. The market forecast we do for you to spot where the opportunities are, make choices. Do I go to Latin America if I'm doing cloud? Because there may be an opportunity. David's presentation was focused on some research we did with tech provider CEOs to get an assessment of what are other people like me doing. I'm going to share with you a little bit of some stuff we do where we're surveying enterprise buyers and really talking about what goes on in the market for enterprise buyers and what's the secret for success. Because when I advise clients, my clients are folks like you, they're always asking, what's the magic bullet? Should I do content marketing? Should I do inbound marketing? Should I do account-based marketing? Is there some magical thing that's going to solve all my problems beyond having a product? And what we see pretty consistently is that what you really have to recognize that in today's IT market, it really isn't about you at all. It's really about getting a deep understanding of the customer situation. And getting that focus when you're selling to enterprise clients is absolutely critical. Because let's talk about what's going on in their world, not what your world. You're out there trying to sell some of these cloud services, or maybe you have a CRM package, or maybe you're doing BI, or maybe you offer some management services. What's going on in the client's world is, let's say they're looking in just the sales organization, and they're thinking about sales enablement. They got a bunch of people looking at sales enablement. In the enterprise organization, they likely have a mix of IT and business people involved. They may have some executives involved. And that's one thing they're consciously thinking about spending money on. At the same time, they may have someone else looking at how we can enhance our forecasting with some predictive analytics. Some of the people are working on that project at the same time. You may still have others, and they're looking at, well, we need to really improve how our salespeople use our content. We develop all this stuff in marketing. Sales says we don't have anything. They create their own stuff. They don't know when to use it. We've all heard some of that story, I'm sure, in the past, too. So they got that going on, too. And then somewhere with these IT guys, they're talking about that big ERP replacement program. What was interesting when we surveyed the customers, and this was people who had participated in buying. In the last 12 months, they had been part of a decision to make an enterprise-level purchase. So not, I'm going to buy 10 more PCs. It was a significant purchase. They actually told us that on average, they were participating in 3 to 4 different procurements where something was bought. If they were in IT, it was closer to 4 or 5. If they were in business, they were still looking at 2 or 3.